One of my favorite creators in the history of Western animation is Genndy Tartakovsky, the man behind iconic works such as Dexter's Laboratory, Samurai Jack, the 2003 Star Wars Clone Wars cartoon, Sym-Bionic Titan, Hotel Transylvania, and Adult Swim's Primal, but has also contributed to the productions of Batman the Animated Series, Two Stupid Dogs, The Critic, Powerpuff Girls, various animated commercials, storyboarded an action sequence in Iron Man 2, and attempted to direct a 3D animated Popeye movie for Sony Pictures Animation. Of course, none of this happened overnight, it happened over the course of several years, and if you look at all of these entries together as a whole, they all paint a larger picture of Tartakovsky's visual style, as well as his evolution as an artist, which is exactly what I'm going to be doing today. Here, I'll be looking at each animated work that he directed to see how they inform each other and went on to shape his career in Western animation. This is the cinematography of Genndy Tartakovsky. Before Dexter's Laboratory was a Cartoon Network series about an arrogant child with a funny accent and the antics of his older sister who constantly gets on his nerves, it was actually Genndy Tartakovsky's student film at the California College of the Arts, with much different character designs, but the same style of frame composition and camera angles that would continue to be present in the series proper. While I do think that a few elements were better in the student film than in the show's pilot with the same narrative, I much rather prefer the character designs in the final product, and redesigning Dexter himself to look more diminutive makes his arrogance all the more funnier.
Why is it taking so long? I should have been famous a minute ago!
Because of these design choices, Dexter's Laboratory fits right in with the rest of Cartoon Network's early programming of classic animated TV shows made by MGM, Warner Brothers, and Hanna-Barbera. But as a consequence, the show's visual language can often feel very flat or static, even when there are instances of dynamic camera angles. It's certainly a product of what Tartakovsky learned at Cal Arts and while working on the Hanna-Barbera cartoon Two Stupid Dogs. It's just that Dexter's Laboratory isn't as much of a game changer as what would come next. After turning over Dexter's Lab to another director and working as a producer for the Powerpuff Girls, Genndy Tartakovsky went on to create his magnum opus, the most defining work of his career, Samurai Jack. What begins as this classical fantasy narrative about an ancient samurai training to fight an evil demon is revealed to be a time travel science fantasy narrative, in which the samurai has been thrown into a distant future where said demon now rules the world, where the samurai must fight to survive, find a way to return to his own time, and go on many adventures along the way. Samurai Jack is heavily inspired by the 70s TV series Kung Fu, starring David Carradine in Yellowface, with an art style where every character has little to no outlines whatsoever, but are still separated from the background environments by an extremely precise level of color contrast, by the difference in lighting, hue, and saturation. While the thick outlines in Dexter's Lab make the images look flat, the near lack of outlines in Samurai Jack actually creates an illusion of depth, which allows the dynamic camera angles to feel much more impactful, and by taking such a minimalist approach, more attention is drawn to the visuals, especially during the groundbreaking zero dialogue sequences, which had been previously unheard of for an American TV series aimed at children. This, combined with all the meticulously designed action choreography, camera composition, clear character poses, holding shots longer to create anticipation, splitting the frame into panels, and the cinematic shifts between aspect ratios, marks the first time where we really start to see Genndy Tartakovsky emerge as a director who intentionally prioritizes visual storytelling. But at the end of the day, Tartakovsky is fully aware that Samurai Jack is still a cartoon, one that is partially influenced by comedic cartoons of the past. The talking dogs that Jack meets in episode 2 are very much reminiscent of the creator's work on Two Stupid Dogs. So I think it's important to recognize that for as many well-choreographed fight sequences as there are, Samurai Jack is never unwilling to indulge in a little humor.
The one and most dangerous man on planet, we pan down, we see Jack, sometimes in hat. It says at the bottom.
There isn't a divide where the visuals are all about the action, while the dialogue is all about the comedy. Rather, there is visual action alongside visual comedy. It's a show that takes itself seriously, but is still lighthearted. A show that still wants to have fun and explore this futuristic setting that allows for infinite storytelling possibilities. If there is any one single cartoon that has defined Tartakovsky's career, it is Samurai Jack. Say what you will about George Lucas, but I think that one of the smartest decisions he made was hiring Genndy Tartakovsky to direct Star Wars Clone Wars. Because when you think about it, Star Wars is the perfect universe for a Tartakovsky cartoon. Both creators are influenced by Akira Kurosawa movies, Jedi characters are partially based off of Japanese samurai, lightsabers are practically magic swords, and during the prequel trilogy, you have the Jedi constantly fighting against droid armies, which are basically robots, so it's a perfect fit for the creator of Samurai Jack, a series whose main hallmark is a samurai with a magic sword fighting against robots in a science fiction setting, to make a Star Wars cartoon, because he is already proficient at animating this type of scenario. Drawing this comparison between the two shows doesn't invalidate their integrity, rather it illustrates how Clone Wars is an expansion of what Tartakovsky learned while working on Samurai Jack, where the color contrast has even more depth, where the visual storytelling feels even more cinematic, and where the cartoony art style even went on to influence Dave Filoni's 3D Clone Wars in 2008. There may be actual outlines this time and more dialogue, but the show's primary method of conveying information is still the visuals, and the use of standard black outlines helps blend the medium of 2D animation with the 3D animation used for certain spaceships, a technique that would continue to be present in future cartoons like Sym-Bionic Titan. Do I think that Clone Wars is the best thing that Tartakovsky worked on? No, but it is really, really good. While Samurai Jack is arguably the best Genndy Tartakovsky cartoon, my personal favorite is Sym-Bionic Titan, a series that was originally conceived as a story about a robot in high school, but transformed into a story about two aliens and a robot secretly immigrating to planet Earth while using giant robots to fight off the giant alien monsters pursuing them. Where the 3D models in Clone Wars were mostly used as a cost-cutting measure, the 3D models in Sym-Bionic Titan also make the giant robots appear more alien, while bringing even more attention to the action choreography. And here, Tartakovsky's extended shot timing really makes the audience feel what it's like to be an awkward teenager.
So, what do you feel like doing?
I don't know.
Sym-Bionic Titan is like a Japanese anime combined with a John Hughes movie from the 1980s, which helps it fit in with other 80s nostalgia cartoons such as Regular Show, yet feels more unique due to its focus on the perspective of teenagers living in America who aren't from the United States. something that Genndy Tartakovsky himself has experience with as a Russian immigrant who attended American high school in the 1980s. Compared to Tartakovsky's previous works, Sym-Bionic Titan feels a lot more personal, with content that seems to resonate more with older audiences who have had similar experiences. And given its eventual success as reruns when they were aired on the Toonami Action Block in 2012, this leads me to believe that the series might have been better off if it was produced as an Adult Swim cartoon from the very beginning. Despite its cancellation due to not being viewed as profitable and the creator's frustration with the network executives who didn't trust him, Sym-Bionic Titan is still my favorite Genndy Tartakovsky cartoon. Although my favorite Adam Sandler movie is Uncut Gems, my second favorite would be one of the Hotel Transylvania movies, which were the first theatrical films directed by Genndy Tartakovsky, who essentially salvaged the project after it had gone through 5 previous directors and gave it a more specific vision. With Tartakovsky on board, the film still existed within the medium of 3-dimensional animation, but gained the design sensibilities of a 2-dimensional cartoon, where the character models were sculpted to feel more like handmade drawings, where motion blur was actually removed to give the action poses more clarity, and where the film utilized techniques like squash and stretch to create more expressive animation. In my opinion, the Hotel Transylvania trilogy is great, but in terms of narrative, I think they're the weakest stories that Tartakovsky has worked on, because while the original 2012 film smartly focuses on Dracula as the protagonist instead of one of the characters from the romance plot, its 2015 sequel makes a strange decision near the end that kind of goes against Dracula's character arc, and the 2018 sequel doesn't even have an arc for Dracula at all. I still think they're good movies, I just think that they could have been a little bit better, and part of me wishes that I could trade the third film for the Popeye movie that never came to fruition. Considering how Genndy Tartakovsky's very first animation teacher was an animator for the original Popeye cartoons, I think that a Tartakovsky-directed Popeye film would have been a fitting way to see his animation career come full circle. But I guess it just wasn't meant to be. In my eyes, Samurai Jack Season 5 is a completely different production than the previous seasons, and that's because they didn't really intend to make another season in the first place. The most concrete idea for Samurai Jack's ending was to make it into a movie, but needless to say, that idea ended up falling through and instead morphed into a 5th season of Samurai Jack when it was eventually picked up by Adult Swim. Because of this, the final season is at its best when it explores new stories, new environments, new characters, new action sequences, and even a new way of characterizing its main protagonist. While by contrast, its attempt at wrapping up the entire Samurai Jack narrative kind of falls flat, because it feels cliché and hinges upon something that just doesn't work. Honestly, the fact that female protagonist Ashi bears such a resemblance to Mavis, Dracula's daughter from Hotel Transylvania, and Princess Alana, a literal teenager from Sym-Bionic Titan, makes it really uncomfortable when Ashi later becomes Samurai Jack's love interest. Especially when you consider how Jack has been trapped in the future for over 50 years, and that Ashi was born in between that time frame. It's just a little, yikes. I mean, Jack's character has always had a certain weakness for women in the previous seasons, so it does make sense to finally give him a girlfriend, but I don't think that idea is really compatible with the gigantic time skip at the start of the season, and what ends up happening to that girlfriend feels like a disservice to her character. While the visuals in Season 5 are still fantastic, the long-awaited conclusion to Samurai Jack's narrative is honestly kind of disappointing. With all this in mind, the stage is set for Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal, an animated series produced directly for Adult Swim about a caveman teaming up with a dinosaur for the sake of their mutual survival. While Samurai Jack and Clone Wars crafted scenes and episodes with no dialogue, Primal is an entire series with no dialogue, which didn't happen because of any budget constraints or by accident. It happened because Tartakovsky remembered how impactful the lack of dialogue was in his previous works, and deliberately wanted to make a series that expanded upon those experiences.
Everybody's favorite sequences were all the non-dialogue ones, right? And I thought, wow, I wonder if I could take all the best sequences and put them together in a show, and if it could work.
Like a silent film with modern sound effects, Primal is pure visual storytelling, where the audience can only find out what's happening by visually watching it unfold on screen. The extended shot timing creates dramatic tension, the artwork feels hand-drawn, and its status as an Adult Swim cartoon grants it the freedom to display more visceral carnage, even compared to what was present in Samurai Jack Season 5. The whole conceit of the show is unrealistic, but that's because it's a fictional cartoon, emulating the style of pulp stories that aren't concerned with being realistic at all, which also rings true for what the creator has made in the past.
I think it's some of the best work we've done. I feel like the last 25 years of everything that I've done, as we've done as a team, has built up to this show.
Primal isn't just another Genndy Tartakovsky cartoon, it's the product of every Tartakovsky cartoon that came before, the product of his entire career so far. If I were to describe Genndy Tartakovsky's visual style in one sentence, I would say that it's like a combination of classic cartoon aesthetics with a priority on visual storytelling, where the shot timing builds anticipation and the clarity of the action poses makes the animation easily discernible. He's a creator who is influenced by Japanese anime as well as live-action filmmaking, and loves the medium of animation because it gives him the freedom to create imaginative stories, unbound by the pretense of realism.
Yes, Dexter, I can read your thoughts, and I am smarter than you.
Tartakovsky doesn't want to make pretentious stuff, he wants to make cartoons that pay tribute to the history of animation and have fun doing it.
We're not mimicking real life, we're caricaturing it, we're stylizing it, and it's what filmmaking is at its core.
He understands the importance of cinematic language, but he also makes sure that his works don't take themselves too seriously, and isn't above writing comedy or directing a film that stars Adam Sandler in its voice cast. Genndy Tartakovsky doesn't see himself as revolutionizing the medium, he sees himself as merely contributing to it, while simply doing what he loves the way he wants it to be done.
And I think Genndy gave us an opportunity to all do our best work. I think that's the difference. You know, he brought the whole crew along to work on a great show, and we all won awards for it.
Of course, he didn't make every series all by himself, and more credit deserves to be given to his collaborators like Paul Rudish, Brian Andrews, Scott Willis, and Derek Bachman, but I still think that Tartakovsky has his own unique style that is present in each of his works, which, when viewed in the context of each other, demonstrate his evolution as an artist.
Why I got into animation, personally, was that I could draw it and I could create a movement that only I could do.
not a person that was the son of a famous director or had these incredible Hollywood connections.
He's a creative person. He was the first artistic partner I've ever had.
The easiest person I've ever worked with.
He's a wild man.
From Dexter's Laboratory to Samurai Jack, Star Wars Clone Wars, Sym-Bionic Titan, Hotel Transylvania, and Primal, they all come together to form the animated cinematography of Genndy Tartakovsky.